Okay, y'all, I got you with Mercury in the sixth house. So, Mercury is the planet of communication, thinking process, how you talk to people. Are you a loudspeaker? Are you a person who internalizes shit? Are you more of a listener? Are you an extrovert? You like to talk a lot and deliver information that you've heard or something you feel strongly about, right? Um, Now we got the sixth house, which is the house of service to yourself and others, health, routine, and also legacies. So we're gonna go through all the signs in Mercury as they land in the sixth house. All right. So first off is Aries, Mercury in the sixth house. Right. Aries, Mercury in the sixth house. You and I know about this a little bit. You have quick um, thinking, right? You can see a situation and know what to do immediately. Decisive thinking, right? This helps you out in the workplace to get shit done. You know, shit stagnant at work. You're the one that's getting people like moving, getting people like to do shit. You know, asking the right questions if you need to ask questions. Um, telling people where they need to be at with specific areas, and it's not like you're doing too much, right? You know how to like basically give them the gist of what they need to know. If they need to know more, of course you're gonna let them know more. Because see, this is a placement like that, right? So if you have Aries Mercury in the sixth house, you're gonna like be a little more detail oriented than other Aries Mercury's, right? So you're gonna give those details as needed, but you ain't gonna do that for every person, right? So if this person just needs to go do something, you're gonna tell them go do that. And then if this person um needs to like know a whole bunch of shit for their job or whatever, you're gonna lay that all on them, and then have them execute. Your daily routine is like that, right? um you're quick um to think something through, right? And people like you for that. They probably keep you around because you know how to like just get shit done. You have a like get shit done mindset. Um, there's like no time for like lollygagging and other things. Um, and then when it comes to making your schedule, you're much like that in that way too. You always got to be doing something in your day. Like even if you ain't at work, you got to be challenging yourself mentally, physically, because Aries rules physical, so it's gonna like go from being mental to also being physical, right? Um, so like you might go to the gym, but you're gonna like challenge yourself. Last week I got this weight, and this week I gotta get this weight, and I have to get this weight this week. There's no fucking holding back. I have to make sure that shit happens. Um, and people will probably remember you as a person who was just like really good at like making like the right like quick judgment calls that are like necessary when shit's like just stagnant. You know what I mean? Like it shit's just not nothing's happening, but you know how to get the ball rolling on things. You know how to say what you need to say, and also how to get people to do what they need to do, right? Now the next sign is Taurus Mercury in the sixth house. So Taurus Mercury in the sixth house, you ain't always like an extrovert, right? So you're gonna think a little more before you even say something. See, you're more of an observer and a listener when it comes to like that Mercury placement, right? Um, you think about, but you're a problem solver too, because like you want to think about how you can be of service to other people at the same time, how you're not going to allow them to consume your time because time is energy and that's what you need, right? You need to have time for yourself. You can't just give yourself to everybody else. It's about serving yourself and others. And you think of a plan to where you can serve yourself and serve others at the same time. And that takes time sometimes, but you're willing to put that work in and think, I'm not just trying to be you know um selfish or anything like that, or not abuse to people. I have, ways to, help people out, and I also, have a, you know it in me to just want to help, other people out. I gotta be doing something too, right? But you're not gonna allow them to take your time away. So you're gonna be, planning, right? You're more of a planner, thinker, but you look at, what practical things need to be done. You look at the things you value, and then you're like, okay, I can do this kind of job for these kind of people, and I can make money, and they can be satisfied with whatever I, do for them, whatever kind of work I do for them. And with this placement, you don't do shit half-assed, right? You make sure you do it no matter what's going on. You're gonna be there for people. You're gonna actually take time and do shit for people, right? Um, Even if you don't see the rewards right away. But another thing about you is you keep a routine schedule, right? And you're like on top of that shit. Consistent schedule, right? You don't like um, shit coming in and throwing your routine off. So you go to work at a certain time, you go to the gym at a certain time, and you stay consistent with that specific thing. That will piss you off a bit. However, you know, life's full of hiccups, and you like more than other tourist Mercuries, you're one that can like understand that yes, this pisses me off, but at the same time, I'll just go back and hit it the same way as I usually do tomorrow, because tomorrow that disruption or whatever ain't gonna be there. So I'll do that. And then like I say, you more willing to, um, uh, have like a plan B than other people, right? Other like Mercury and Taurus people who like truly just stick to that, and no matter what, they stick to that. If you have to like change some shit up, like instead of going to the gym at 4, you're going at 5. And somebody who ain't don't have it in the sixth house would probably be more angry and more upset about that shit. And still try to make that shit work out. But if you end up having to change that to like 5 o'clock, it's all right for you, as long as everything is taken care of at home. Because like you also think about money too, and as my finances correct, is everything where it needs to be, you know. So you're on top of money too. People will know you as a sensible kind of thinker, right? A guy or girl who, man, you it makes sense when you like actually take action and do something, right? And put your thoughts to work. At work or in your life when you're trying to build something, build your money up. It all makes sense. Um, and you ain't gonna do something that's just like whatever. You're gonna think things through before you do something. Now, the next sign is Gemini, Mercury in sixth house, right? Gemini, Mercury in the sixth house. You have a lot on your mind and a lot to say to people. You like to read, you like to, talk to others, but like more so about like serious shit if it's in the sixth house, right? About how you can be a better person at work, how you can be a better person, um, like when you're doing other things outside of work. You know, you want to make sure your people skills are on point. But you're just like always like that. So like by the time you're an adult, you already got that shit handled. So when you go to work, you know how to talk to your boss, you know how to talk to people beneath you. If you wanted to also like work for yourself, you would know how to go about doing it. You would have certain friends you knew who were like about their shit. They read books, they knew about money, they knew about all kind of things, so you could learn from them too. This is a great placement to have because you can learn um, about other people and about yourself, through other people. You don't have a problem talking to people. Um, some people, don't like it and shit. So like, they might not want to hear your shit. Like you might be like, cause you're probably right about what you're saying too. You're a person who likes to bring up facts and shit, right? More so than another Gemini and Mercury, right? And like you're probably telling them the truth, and like giving them, your sense on like what the fuck's going on in their life. But then, they might not have asked you, or if they asked, well, they probably did ask you though, because that's the thing with this placement. You're kind of seen as that smart person. People come to you and they know that you know something about something. You've talked to somebody, or you've read it in a book somewhere, or you've studied that shit your whole life. You let me know something, and you let them know, and it's like the truth, and it hurts them, but you're like, hey man, that's what it is. you know you wanted to know, so that's what it's going to be. And it's not like that's what it's going to be. That's just what it is. That's what the facts said. This certain book says that. These people say it. And it's like all that. It's all encompassing. You did your fucking work. You actually, you didn't just go to one source. You went to, like, people, books. You actually experienced some of that shit to yourself. So you actually do have the knowledge that they need and want to know. But sometimes if you talking to people who, are a little more emotional or something like that, they might get their feelings hurt. But that's whatever. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You probably stick to a certain schedule. You'll probably cut off people, more so than, not, not saying that you won't talk to, people who are, more foolish or whatever. But if it's gonna like disrupt your routine, going to work and other things, oh, you'll cut them off. You're one of those kind of Geminis, and you'll surround yourself with like new people. You don't got a problem like cutting people off in that kind of way. Now you always, you'll probably keep up to date with them, because you're a person who can talk to somebody and like not talk to them too much. You can just be like, hey, how's the, weather today, and have small talk with them. But you ain't gonna like actually like spend time with them or anything. If it's gonna disrupt your daily routine and daily life, and like really have your life go to shit. You'll cut those people off. Or, what you Gemini's, or Gemini Mercury in this case would do. Keep them around, but just not spend that much time with them, because you're playing it smart. You still see use for them, but not like that, right? If I want to get my money, if I ain't gonna listen to that person, I'm gonna listen to somebody who actually has the experience and the knowledge I need. And you may even tell them that, depending on how you feel, or really how you think about that person. Um, the next person is Cancer Mercury in the sixth house. So Cancer Mercury in the sixth house, you're an emotional thinker, but you think about people's feelings and emotions before you do something. But sometimes you're thinking about too much of your own emotions and your feelings, so that can lead to some conflict a little bit. But you think about your emotions, think about your feelings, and how that affects your life, your daily life and shit. So some of you are actually cool with people because of that. um you understand what triggers you emotionally, what triggers you, um, you and with that you're like, okay, well, other people have different triggers and what they like and don't like. And even though we're going to work, or I have this kind of job, life stressful and other things, but it ain't just me, it's like everybody else too. They have that going on. It's just not like, you would probably be like also like on some shit like, they wouldn't understand though, because it's not, we don't have the same jobs. Yes, that's true that we have um all been through, our, trials and tribulations or whatever, with whatever the fuck's going on, you know, at work, outside of work, whatever. But you're more so focused on, that. But you're intuitive, so you can tell when somebody, at work is, going through it or whatever. So you're a good worker, you're decent, you like, you know the importance of like going to work and shit, right? You don't want to do it, but then you have to do it because it's like, part of life and shit. but you're also there for the, like, man, you're there for the people too. So like you'll find somebody at work that you like, and you really fuck with them on a deeper level, and you're like, damn man, I want to make sure that when you come to work, you're not like dragging everybody else down. um Maybe you should take a day off or something, or whatever, because that could fuck with me, and that could then fuck with the whole work environment. And you're like somebody who can like catch that shit and be like, maybe you should do that. Maybe you should, decide to get or you decide that for yourself, and that you might need to get another job because you feel as though or know that these people at this specific job just tick you off. So you have to get a new job because your emotions can do that shit to people. Now you're not a cancer and whatnot, but you still think in those kind of terms. You think emotionally and other things, but it helps you with, you have better intuition. You know how to go about, talking to people, right? Understanding also that they too, right, have emotions. They too have feelings, and you can move them certain ways with how you speak to them. You can sweet talk people at times. You can, manipulate the situation to your advantage. And that's the kind of shit that you people do. You're manipulate manipulation in a good way and a bad way. Um, Outside of work too, inside of work, um, you probably like to um, do shit with people at certain times and other things. That's where your routine comes into play. I got my work people and I got my home people, and like the home people gotta really be at home with me, and like don't like really, because like who you live with and other things, right? And if you're living by yourself, you know what kind of people you want to live with, or would seek to live with. If you're living alone, right, you know what kind of support you want from them. You don't like when people um, change up on you too much. That can throw you out of sorts a little bit. Like if it's like they're always somebody who changes up, it's like all right, right. But if there's somebody who's like, let's use me for an example. I'm a Taurus, so like I don't really change too much, right? There's certain things about me that change, but at my core, I'm still Darius. I'm still Darius the Green Angel. I've been doing this shit for 2 years, y'all, and I've changed and stuff, but I'm still doing the same thing, bringing you astrology, anime knowledge, and all that shit, right? If you saw me like get out of like character, and now I'm talking about you know some shit that I don't usually talk about, and I'm bringing that shit to you, you're gonna feel that, and you're gonna be like, well, what the hell? I thought that this was gonna be a video about astrology and anime, but now you're talking about, you know, rocket ships going to space and going and being a part of NASA and or all kind of shit. Just I don't do right. You don't like that fucking with your daily, life and other things. But you're an intuitive person, and people like you for that, right? Because where other people don't see things, you see it because you don't watch what people say, you watch how they move and like also how they make you feel emotionally. But the next sign is Leo Mercury in the sixth house. Now, Leo Mercury in the sixth house will try to, man, they're the ones who will at work or in their life when they're at their job, they'll make sure everybody's on their shit, doing what they're supposed to do. Hey, you're over there doing that shit, right? Not playing games. You're over there at your job, at your position, doing what you're supposed to do. And you're like, just it's like, even if you're not the boss, you kind of like seem like it sometimes. And like you could get into conflicts with the fucking boss because of that shit, right? You don't hold the position of like manager or whatever. You ain't supposed to be doing that. But then you're like this. Well, that might be true, but like, what are you doing? You're not doing your job properly. And you won't shy away from saying that shit either because you're confident about what you're saying. And what you're saying is true. See, because it's not like it ain't coming from a place of ego, it's coming from a place of I'm seeing what needs to happen. This person's not doing their job. Maybe we need to get somebody else who's, better suited for that job to do it instead of this person. Maybe that person needs fired or whatever. But you can also, see all this shit, right? Because you watch actions too. Um, um, you, but like I said, you could also get trouble with, like, people who have authority and other things. But like if it's working out, it's working out because like they probably already, if they're cool with you, is what I'm saying. They know that you're like that and they appreciate you for that. But then you probably will want to like get a new job or something eventually, and like actually, head honcho your own shit, right? Um, have the right people around you, have the right circle. I have a guy that does this, a guy who does that, and a guy who does this, and they all listen to me because I'm, the leader, and I know, I basically, I get their spirits up and everything, right? You just know how to make like all the pieces fall into place, you know, perfectly. And people like know you as that kind of like architect when you're thinking about shit, right? In your mind. This person specifically is this. I might not like them for this or that, but in like you're one of those Leos who can do shit like that. You can acknowledge what you don't like about somebody and then be like, but they still have, this in them. You're a little less like egotistical, but like still kind of like that you can come off that way because like you're confident, right, when you speak. So people are like, you're egotistical, you're arrogant, this and that, but you're actually just giving, what's going on, and what it could be, or well, what it should be, really in the workplace and shit, because like you lock the fuck in if you have it in this house, right? And then when it comes to your, daily routine, this is fixed fire in the mind. So you are flexible, but when shit goes, sideways, you're gonna let somebody know. You're like, oh well, I didn't plan on doing this today. This wasn't in the plans. You're flexible too, but you're still like, you'll be mad for a little bit. You'll let them know where they went wrong so they don't do it again. You might, yell, scream, bitch at them, but it was out of like, it ain't out of ego, because this is Mercury. It's out of, what you were supposed to do and you did this instead. So now, I'm angry and I'm gonna like, light you up for it. But then, you calm down and you're like, okay, we can, let this, pass by. But then, tomorrow, you know, back on schedule, that kind of shit, right? And like that's the thing about you. You're not afraid to like let people know what the fuck they need to do when they gotta do it. To like make everything, work right. And then like when you're saying shit like that, like you might even catch yourself saying that shit sometimes. Because Leo is like a person who likes to bring people together, right? But like on some serious shit with this placement, right? You don't want people around who's gonna drag the group down. See, you're actually thinking like a like a real leader type shit. Like you're not with the like silly shit that much. Like not really. Um, Now people might think you are, but you ain't. You're more so like focused on like what needs to be done, problem solving and shit like that. A little more analytical about how, things need to be done. And you can be fun sometimes, but you like, how to like, there's a time and place for that. And you're like one of those kinds that can really lock in that way. And like still have people like, okay, I really needed to hear that, thanks, or you saw that they could work somewhere else or whatever, you know how to put people in the right spots. And it's like a quick thing that you see because you know that person, and then you're like, I know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Okay, hey man, do this, instead of this. And then things start to, run smoother. You're not even like running your mouth too much about little details or anything. Like, not if you don't have to. You're just giving them what they need and they appreciate you for it. Now, the next sign is Virgo, Mercury in the sixth house. Virgo, Mercury in the sixth house. This is a great placement As far as six house placements, this is probably the best one. You are a Virgo, and Virgo rules the sixth house, so it's a home placement for you. And it's in Mercury, which Mercury is also ruled by um, Virgo. So you're very much like that, right? A very analytical, methodical person about every little thing you do in life. Everything has a meaning. Everything. You don't do anything half-ass. You don't half-ass a fucking thing with this placement, right? You pick people to fuck apart when they mess up, and you don't miss a beat. You tell them exactly why they're wrong and other things, right? Um, it's a great thing in the workplace. They understand you to be a hard worker, a person who comes in, does what's required of them, and then goes home to do whatever they do. And when you go home to do whatever you do, you have a certain schedule about it, right? So you go to work. Well, you wake up first, and then you go to work, and then you probably work out because you have that earthly kind of thinking about you. Um, Virgo's mutable earth. So that means you're flexible too, but it's still earth, right? So it comes from a place of, okay, I'm flexible, but I ain't gonna do that shit all the time. I ain't gonna bend all the time. If I need to, change when I have to go to the gym, that is fine, right? Or if I have to change who I have to work out with, or who I have to cut off from working out with, because of whatever situation your life throws at you, right? Sometimes you have to cut people off, and you can do that. And you can also, but your ears are still there because you're also analytical. You still hear people, and you still watch what they do. You do both. You watch actions and listen to what they say. But if it ain't matching up, you know when to cut people off. And I always bring up the nitpicking and shit with them, and it's very true. But it comes from a place of, man, you don't want to let yourself down in that way. You want to make sure, when you die and shit, you can say that I've done everything I could. I thought everything through. I planned everything out. I told people when they needed to know something, gave them the information correctly, clear, concisely, and all that shit. And you let them know. And it's a great placement to have because then you have all for your finances in order. You know when you're going to do this, going to do that. And then when you see a situation, you can pick it apart. Oh, this is wrong. This is wrong. That's off by a few centimeters, that kind of shit. Now, the next sign is Mercury in Libra in the sixth house, right? Mercury in Libra in the sixth house. You have, you have, not so. It ain't a bad placement, Dad. You like to consider other people when thinking. See, you're much like a Virgo with this placement, except you're more talkative. You're more trying to get involved with other people, where Virgo will be if I have to take time for myself, I will. Libra, you're not like that. You're gonna think about people a lot more. And you're gonna be like this if you have a Mercury in Libra in the sixth house. You're gonna be um, so you gave somebody information, right? And then the next day or a couple days, you're gonna think about that person. You're gonna be like, oh, I wonder if that person, put into action what I told them to do, or if they talked to that person I told them to talk to, because I didn't know, but I know that that person knows what they need to get their life right. And then you're gonna follow up and make sure they're cool, right? Because that's what you are, right? And you think like that. You think and you consider other people before doing things, and then you also, right, you try to bring peace to the like work environment. you know what your role is, his role is, so you're gonna do that. We don't need to like come to blows or get people fired or any of that kind of thing. You're kind of like solving the issue. You would like for like shit not to get to that point if you're like at one of those kind of jobs. And then you follow a schedule too. But again, Libra's a wind sign, so they're more considered or concerned with other people, like even before themselves type shit. These people can get to being like that, thinking about others a lot for themselves. But at the same time, it's like a balance thing because that's what Libra is. So, you catch yourself, you're like, damn, maybe I take time for myself. Let me look at my life and see. Maybe I can cut back on talking to people. Not cut them off completely, but take time to, really get my life together, right? Like make sure my finances right, make sure I'm going to the gym enough, all kind of things. Because like Libra also is ruled by Venus, so you care about your um, like how you carry yourself too. If you're looking good, are you handsome? Are you beautiful if you're a female? That kind of shit's also playing on your mind. That brings you back to like you kind of a little bit. Because you like don't want to be seen as a person who's not put together, doesn't know or isn't knowledgeable on anything. You know what you know, and you're a person who wants to seem approachable as well. So you thinking in those terms too when you're like going about what you should wear, how you should talk to people, you know, um, and you think about all that shit, and that's why you're like great at talking to people because you actually think about that. Whereas other signs would just say whatever the fuck they say, however they say it, um, looking however they look, and you're like, I understand that people are comfortable with this, so I wear this. Um, but at the same time, you have your own style about it. You try to at least. Um, but yeah, man, you try to bring fairness to shit too, because you try to think in fairness, because that's scales. Okay, this person says this and this person says that. I'm trying to make things fair. Maybe this person hasn't been heard, so let me fucking back him up today. That guy might be my friend, but hey, man, this guy has been, getting the shitty end of the stick. Let's let him, get what he needs right now or whatever, and then later we can do what we got to do, you know? Because you don't want to be thinking about that shit, because you think about people. The next sign is Scorpio Mercury in the sixth house. So Scorpio Mercury in the sixth house, you are also very intuitive like Cancer, but you like to take action, you know? You won't let those emotions overcome you per se, right? You're good at manipulating a situation. Specifically, if you're a Mercury Scorpio, Scorpio Mer- Scorpio Mercury in the sixth house. Um, if there's something that needs to be done, let's say you're at work, um, you're gonna be like that person, right? Who is there at the right time, and you're like, I'll do overtime, or I'll do this. This person can't do it, that kind of thing. And you're not loud, but your actions, show that you're a person who's like willing to like do things. So then outside of work, you're willing to do things. You're willing to, find the people who interest you. You don't really give a fuck about what other people think either. Now you probably know how they feel towards you, to some degree. You know, basically, bad or good feelings towards you, and then you capitalize on that. What I mean by that is, you're like, if somebody likes you or they do, you're like, hey, this and that, and sweet talk them, or let them know what the fuck you're about. Basically, you let them know what the fuck you're about. And then you get things from them. You get all kind of things. You get a friend. You get money. You get all kind of shit. Basically, you're your own little strategist. You break people like apart through like body language, that kind of thing. Subtleties. You pick up on that kind of shit. Words, yeah, you hear things, and like you do. See, that's the thing. You know how to like see through some bullshit too. So like, let's say somebody was talking sweet. You're like, okay, you're talking sweet, but why are you talking sweet? See, and you actually find that shit more, you know, disturbing than somebody who's just straight up like fuck you, and you're like, okay, well, that's to be expected. But then this person's like, you're trying to play games with me. I don't like that. You probably won't, help that person out if you sense any type of bullshit or, trickery or anything like that. So you're good at protecting yourself in that way. You can cut people off. You're also very secretive, which is a good thing. I don't hate you for being secretive, by the way. The Green Angel don't hate Scorpio people for being secretive. Um, Now, if you are the opposite sex, I do want you to, trust me a little more. But, and that's not for everybody, but, if they ever see this in the future, right? Years down the line, they see this fucking video, right? But, um, you know, you gotta like, do that shit though, man. It's not none of their business. It's not my business, it's yours. Um, they, or you as a Scorpio Mercury, do that kind of thing. And that does protect you, man. It protects you and other things. But like in a social situation, things can get like a little shaky because you might be too closed off. What I mean by that is you're not talking to people enough. Like you don't have to like talk like a Gemini, but you gotta talk a little bit, and at least be a part of like the community. Because like if you cut yourself off completely from people, then it's like, oh, we don't know shit about this person. He hasn't talked to anybody. Of course you have some friends that you talk to and other things. Because like if because you know that too. You're like, I can't cut myself off completely from people. So I have to be, chatty a bit. And I'll talk to this guy because this guy's cool enough. This person because they're cool enough. If I have to tell somebody some shit, every once in a while I'll tell them, and sometimes you're the one, getting people to move, right? Um, Now the next sign is Sagittarius Mercury in the sixth house. So you're a person who, thinks quick. No slow shit. You're confident about what you need to say when you need to say it. You'll tell people at work, when they disrespect you, if they're off, like if they're, off topic or, not doing shit right, we're at work, we're supposed to do this, and you're letting them know. And you say that shit kind of loud too. So other people heard you too. So they knew that you were, focused on what you had to do, going to work. Now, you might be a little unfiltered. You might try to hold back a little bit, if you like your job. But if you don't, you know what? You probably don't, though. Honestly, you probably don't. But they know that about you. It's like, okay, you can say all that, but if you actually do something, that's what the people at work are concerned about. You can even like, get away with, saying a few, cuss words a little bit at work. But then when you like do that shit excessively, or you start like flipping, chairs and shit like that, then they'll probably like fire your ass, right? But you're also a person who likes to, experience things, right? You want to, hear people. You like to hear people and hear stories and other things, but you want to make those stories yourself, right? So that's what you strive to do. Um, it ain't that you don't like to listen to people; you like to hear what people have to say. That's how you get your ideas to create a life that you want to, have, right? A life you want to experience. And, um, with like when it comes to routine, Sagittarius's routine is not a routine schedule that is like, traditional or whatever. It's not quote unquote a routine that other people should follow kind of shit. It's intriguing, but it's not for everybody, right? It's for you because you understand who you are, and well, you're learning about things. You're learning about people. Um, you like to and that learning about people part, right? That helps you out in the workplace too. You know what kind of people are good at like speaking, and what kind of people ain't. You know, you know how to like inspire others to keep coming to work. You try to bring a positive light to the workspace, that kind of thing. We might be on for like the next 6 weeks, but then we have like a break. Then you can do whatever the fuck you want, that kind of thing. And you're like the one bringing that shit up, a little bit, trying to keep people's spirits up. If you're working at one of those kind of jobs. But then if you're like doing your own thing, you don't gotta worry about it, and it's just more vibrant and more cool to be around you. Now, like I said, you have a mouth on you, so then people will be like, "Oh shit," they could get offended or whatever. They may or may not come back into your life. You might be like, "Why?" It's probably because that mouth. But then it's like they probably do come back because they understand that you're just like that, right? And that's who you are. Consistently, a person who says what's on their mind. But that's why people like you, because you don't hold back on that shit, right? Where other people would keep that shit closed or whatever for whatever reason, you don't. You put it on blast. You let them know what the fuck's going on. You know, it may be a simple plan to other people, but it's like a plan worth following. You know, your life, right? We learn as we go, kind of shit. That's the kind of person you are. Um, and I don't mind that. You know, as long as you don't got anything sideways to say about me too much, we could probably be friends too. Sagittarius, Mercury in the sixth house. Because you're also about that business too. Like you think about your future, like in like that kind of way. Finances, and if I fuck around with these people too much, because I've already hang out with those kind of people, will that lead me astray in the future? I could still be friends with them and other things because think more extrovertedly. I can, check in on them and, tell jokes, but I shouldn't spend too much time with those people. They could, have me, going down a, path I don't want to, and for my future and the vision that I have for myself, that kind of thing. Um, but the next sign on the list is Capricorn, Mercury in the sixth house, right? So this person thinks very constructively, organized, um, very detail oriented as well. Um, they like to, think about their career and how that is in the long run and other things, right? Where to put their money at. They're the best person to do, like, know about this shit, right? They know when to cut people off. They know how to, get people moving, right? So at work, see, they might be managers at work. And if they ain't the manager, they're like the person that people like know should be the manager, but ain't. So this guy or this person, this female, even this female possibly, possibly, she's like, he or she's like, hey, you're supposed to be doing this, do that. This is the job that you're supposed to do. You're doing this job. You ain't supposed to be talking to so and so over there. You're supposed to be doing this job. And you like let them know what the fuck they're doing. And if they don't know, you're like, well, damn, you probably shouldn't have been hired. But I'll tell you anyways. This is what this job entails. So if you can't do it, you probably want to find another job. And you like, very logical, very practical about how they should be doing things, and maybe they should look into another career because if you got hired on, I don't know what those people were doing, but you shouldn't be at this job, you know, because we're looking to like make shit happen at work, do a job right, and you're not doing it right. Even after I told you, so you probably have to get a new job. Um, because this shit ain't for you. This ain't your career. This ain't your career path, man. And you ain't even like on some like fucked up shit. You're like cool about it. You're like, hey man, you probably just did this to get money and other things, because you have a life and other things you want to like, pay bills and other shit. But you probably should have picked another job that was more suited to like your needs. And I don't know why people would hire you on if you ain't, you know, doing what we require of you. Because you think very much like that. But, again, it's a nurse sign, so you're probably physically active. You like to go to the gym at a certain time. You like to, go on walks possibly, read books even, about, uh, learning about all kinds of shit, right? And then possibly talk to people, and you talk to people when you need to, mostly at work. And that's mostly what's on your mind actually with this placement. And it's like a good thing too because you're already a person who's also got a sense of urgency and other things, and you like have plans in the future to like move up in your job or career path that you've taken, right? And then possibly, well, not possibly, you're also like not just doing that, you have your own business plans for in the future for your own business. So like that's if you're like truly locked in with this placement, and you probably do if you have it in the sixth house, right? Because that has to do with legacy and routine, right? So you're building, a career, so then you can have your own business in like doing that similar kind of shit. But then you're like head honcho and you can tell people, what to do. Hey, I hired you to do this, so it's this, and you let them know. And then it's like, we make money, and the business grows, and then we grow. And it's like, a legacy that you can leave for your offspring. And if it's not that, man, people will still remember you as a fucking go getter, man. Girls too, your friends and shit like that, right? So the next person is Mercury in Aquarius in the sixth house. So you are also a person who likes to think and talk about things, right? But not just anything, right? You like to talk about, how to, you know, improve upon things, like improvement in daily life for people and yourself. More, constructive, more not I'm trying to one up you, but if you have to like you like to talk to people, right? So like you probably limit talking to idiots too much, you know but you see, like I said, the wind signs are great at doing that, right? They know how to keep people around without being with certain people too long. So like with displacement, right, if it has anything to do with like you'll cut somebody off if they are not helping you build a life that is like worth, okay, you want to leave something for your kids, you want to leave something for the world to remember you by. Is me hanging out with these people who are, cool or, unique in their own way, is that going to help me in the future? And like when you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about other people, but you're also thinking about your own well-being, which is a good thing. That's what you're supposed to do if you have shit in this house. It's never a bad thing to think about your, health and shit, right? you know so I should limit the time I spend with certain people, even though they interest me somewhat, to get something started. Not just something started, but like a business or ideas floating around. you know get people to see certain things that I see in this life, right? Because you pick up on things that the other one signs do. The other one signs, and it ain't that they can't think for themselves, it's just you are more like that. thinking outside the box, going against the norm a little bit. When they say this, right, this is what it is for people, this is how it has to be, more so like a Libra saying some shit like that, because they like listen to people and they try to be in good favor with the people, right? You could then like challenge that and argue and be like, well, guess what? That might be true, but what about this? Did you ever think about that? And that this, might not be bad to, try something new, that kind of thing. Basically, people who have this placement, and I don't know, but I know that there's people, who were like revolutionized, certain things in like technology and other things who had this placement. Um, they were, really about their work and keeping their mind fresh, learning new things. See, you ain't gonna just accept, the same old shit, hearing that shit. There's other things to learn about. Um, like other things to even learn about in, one specific area. Because it's fixed wind. So you can look at cars, right, and then be like, flying cars. You're thinking that kind of way. And this is just an example, man. There's all kind of ways these Aquarius people think. Aquarius Mercury thing. Um, you're thinking about um, flying cars where they can still be driven on the ground. They flip the tires underneath, and then it's like some type of hovering mechanism that's there. And that's what you're thinking, because we can still, we can use the sky for that, but then we can still have people down here driving cars like they normally do. And that's like the transition period before everything's like flying cars and shit like that, right? And we forget about like cars that use wheels completely, but that's like the period before that, right? Where the wheels, come up underneath the car, boom, all four of them, and then then you can fly or whatever, right? Now, people are like, well, we're not there yet, but we're getting there, slowly but surely, kind of shit, right? Um, and you're thinking in those terms, but somebody else is saying, we're just gonna go straight into like flying cars, and then like you either have a flying car or you have another car, but then you're saying this, and it's the debate and other things, but it's probably more logical doing it that way, right? Because it's like it's not a we're completely getting rid of this, we ease into that kind of, right? And because like other people still like to drive on the road, and you're taking those people into consideration a little bit too. Um, Now the last placement is Pisces Mercury in the sixth house. You care about your emotions and how you feel, so you're gonna take care of yourself. Your health. If you have to, see people, um, and what I mean by that is, Pisces likes to, fuck with the opposite sex. So if you're female, you like guys, and if you're a guy, you like female. Right? You gotta make sure you take care of that. Sometimes you might overdo it, but you understand, you learn about yourself through doing that, right? On a serious note, though, because this is in the sixth house, you'll probably be more so cutting yourself off and shit like that. Not because, and it ain't cutting yourself off, it's just, doing shit in moderation a little bit. You know, that's outside of work. You understand when it's time to get something done, it's time to get something done. And like you try to like get people's spirits up too, but not in a like Sagittarius or fire sign kind of way. See, it's more, settle, but not settle. Because you're an introvert, you think more like an introvert. So you approach like one person who is a person who is down or whatever at work, and they're like a person that can like bring other people up or bring other people down, or bring you up or bring you down to where you want to come to work more and other things. But if they're down, you're gonna like tell them some shit. You're gonna be like, hey man, why are you like this, and get to the bottom of it, and then be like, you know what, We should, do this after work. And then probably come up with like being friends and, having some kind of like creative endeavors, going that way. Um, but you care about your health too. So like you don't like to cut people off either, especially when it comes to like the opposite sex and other things. But if you have to, you will. And, you know, you'll learn something from that. You gain wisdom about people and what kind of people, mess with you that way. But it's also not a, deterrent necessarily. You just know what to look for next time you fuck with somebody of like a certain race or somebody of a certain height or somebody of a certain, sign. You know how to go about that better than you did the first time. Because like the first time you fucked with them, it was like the first person you met that was like that, right? Now you know how to go about that a different way, than you did the first time. But you're also very willing to, try new things, right? And then you like to bring people's spirits up, let them know, hey, yeah, we're at work, but after work, that's some other things. Oh, some shit happened to you, some shit happened to me too, and you're kind of trying to bring people's spirits up a little bit. But it's not like a loud thing. It's like you bring somebody on the side during break and you try that shit. Like I said, you're very intuitive, like the other wise signs. you know so that helps you out in the long run. How people feel, you know what they're well, you don't know what they're going through until you talk to them, but you basically know if they're in a good mood or a bad mood before you even say anything, and you do know that. You like to make sure things go smoothly too. You're a flexible sign, so like you stick to a routine. I get up at a certain time, I do this at a certain time, all that. You'll be a little sideways because you are emotional, but at the same time you're flexible too, so you're like, what, maybe I should change my schedule up to not suit other people's needs, but I was probably forgetting about, because you being a little more emotionally thinking, I was probably forgetting about certain people that I should have accounted for. But now that I've accounted for them, now I can, manage my life better. And that's all the signs in the sixth house, right? Aries through Pisces, Mercury signs in the sixth house. Next week, I'll come with Venus in the sixth house for all 12 signs. Venus, right? Astrological readings from me are $350. That comes with your, Chinese astrology too, your um, numerology um, readings as well. That's what that is. $350 though. But be cool, calm the corner, and let me know what your Mercury sign is, and if it's in the sixth house. Leave that shit in the comments, y'all. But be cool, calm the corner.